The wind screamed across the mountain like a wounded animal as Daniel Porter pulled his coat against his chest. Snow fell so thick that he could barely see 10 feet ahead, and the temperature had dropped far below what the weather reports had predicted. He had lived in these Montana mountains for 3 years now, ever since the accident that took his wife Laura and his daughter Sophie, and he knew when a storm meant business. This one meant to kill anyone foolish enough to stay outside. Daniel was 45 years old, with gray starting to show in his dark hair and lines carved deep into his face from grief and hard living. He had been a paramedic once, back when he still believed in saving people, back when he still had people worth saving. Now he trapped animals and guided hunters through the wilderness, and he spoke to no one for weeks at a time. That was how he wanted it. The world had changed too much since humanity made first contact with the Galactic Conquered 3 years ago, and Daniel wanted no part of it. He was heading back to his cabin after checking his supply cache when he saw the smoke rising from the creek bed. Smoke meant fire, and fire in a blizzard meant someone was in trouble. Daniel almost turned away. He had learned the hard way that caring about others only led to pain, but his feet carried him toward the smoke anyway, because some habits were harder to break than others. What he found was not a campfire. It was a crashed ship, small and silver, half buried in the snow beside the frozen creek. The metal was torn open on one side, and sparks still flew from damaged wires inside. Daniel had seen enough news footage to recognize alien technology when he saw it. This was an escape pod, the kind used on larger vessels when something went wrong. He approached carefully, his boots crunching through the deep snow. The wind tried to push him back, but he leaned into it and kept moving. When he reached the torn opening in the hull, he looked inside and felt his heart stop. 2 children lay tangled together on the floor of the pod. They were not human. Their skin was silver blue, now turning gray in the cold, and their bodies were thin and fragile-looking. Their eyes were closed, but Daniel could see they were large, taking up much of their small faces. He recognized the species from news reports. A people from a world that orbited twin suns, where cold did not exist and warmth was as common as air. These children were freezing to death. Daniel climbed into the pod, his paramedic training taking over before he could think about what he was doing. He pressed his fingers to the neck of the nearest child, a female, and felt a pulse so weak it was barely there. The second child, a male, was even worse. Their skin felt like ice under his touch. He knew from the news that could not survive cold. Their bodies did not generate heat the way humans did. On there, they absorbed warmth from their environment, from their suns, from heated structures, from each other. In conditions like these, they would fade away within hours, maybe less. Daniel looked out at the blizzard raging beyond the broken pod. The storm would last at least 3 days. His cabin was a 20-minute walk, but in this weather, it would take an hour. There was no way to call for help. His communication equipment was basic, meant only for local range, and the nearest settlement was 2 days away even in good weather. These children would die unless he did something. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. He had come to the mountains to stop caring. He had buried his heart along with his wife and daughter, and he had sworn never to feel that pain again. Saving these children would mean opening himself up to loss once more. What if he failed? What if he tried his best and they died anyway, just like Laura and Sophie had died despite the doctors trying their best? Then the female child opened her eyes. They were violet, huge and beautiful, and filled with more fear than Daniel had ever seen in any living creature. She looked at him, this strange alien being in a strange alien world, and she whispered something in a language he did not understand. But the meaning was clear in her eyes. "Please help us." Daniel made his decision. He would not let these children die alone in the cold. He would not become the kind of man who walked away from suffering just to protect himself. Laura would have wanted him to help. Sophie would have expected nothing less from her father. He gathered the children in his arms, one against each shoulder, and wrapped his coat around them as best he could. They weighed almost nothing, their bodies hollow-boned like birds. The male child did not wake, and his breathing was so shallow that Daniel could barely feel it. The female child's eyes closed again, her strength spent by that one moment of consciousness. Daniel stepped out of the pod and into the storm. The wind hit him like a fist, and the cold bit through his clothes within seconds. He bent his head and started walking, each step a battle against the snow that tried to swallow his legs. The children felt like blocks of ice against his chest, and he could feel their fatting warmth even through his coat. 20 minutes became 40, 40 became 60. Daniel's muscles burned and his lungs ached from breathing the frozen air. Twice he stumbled and nearly fell, but he caught himself and kept going. The thought of Laura and Sophie drove him forward. He had not been able to save them. The shuttle hull breach had happened too fast and they were gone before anyone could reach them. But these children were still alive. They were still fighting. And as long as they fought, so would he. When his cabin finally appeared through the swirling snow, Daniel nearly wept with relief. He kicked the door open and staggered inside, dropping to his knees on the wooden floor. The fire had burned low in the stove, but the cabin was still warm compared to the nightmare outside. Daniel laid the children on his bed and piled every blanket he owned on top of them. Their skin had turned from gray to almost white, and their breathing was barely visible. He fed more wood into the stove and watched the flames grow, knowing already that it would not be enough. Warmth from the air would not save them. Their bodies had lost too much heat and they had no way to generate more. They needed direct heat transfer, immediate and constant, or they would die before morning. Daniel knew what he had to do, and he knew that doing it might cause harm in ways he could not predict. But as he looked at the two small, fragile, dying children on his bed, he knew that he had no other choice. He would become their warmth. Whatever it cost him, whatever it meant for them, he would not let them die. Daniel searched the children's clothing and found a small device attached to the female child's belt. It was round and silver, with symbols he did not recognize etched into its surface. When he touched it, the device hummed to life and projected a soft blue light. Words appeared in the air above it, alien symbols that shifted and changed until they became English. A translation device. Daniel had heard about these but never seen one. He held it close to his mouth and spoke slowly. "Can you hear me? Can you understand?" The female child's eyes fluttered open. She looked at the device, then at Daniel, and her cracked lips moved. The device captured her weak voice and translated it into words that floated in the air between them. "Cold, so cold. Where is my brother?" "He is right here beside you," Daniel said. "You are both safe. You are in my home." The child turned her head and saw the male child lying next to her, still unconscious, barely breathing. Tears spilled from her violet eyes, freezing almost instantly on her gray cheeks. "He is dying," she whispered. "We are both dying. The cold takes us. There is nothing you can do." "What is your name?" Daniel asked. "My brother is. We were on a transport ship fleeing the war on our colony world. The ship was attacked. Our parents put us in an escape pod to save us." Her voice broke. "They stayed behind. The ship was burning. I do not know if they survived." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He knew that pain too well. The pain of loss, the pain of not knowing, the pain of being the one who lived when others did not. "I am going to help you," he said, "but I need to understand what is happening to your bodies. Why can you not stay warm?" Explained as best she could with her fatting strength. Did not create heat inside themselves the way humans did. They absorbed warmth from their surroundings. On there, the twin suns provided endless heat and their buildings and clothing were designed to hold that warmth close. When the temperature dropped below a certain point, their bodies simply stopped working. Their blood thickened. Their hearts slowed. They faded away like candles running out of wax. "Medical technology can save us," said. "Heating machines, warm fluid injections, but you have none of these things." "No," Daniel admitted, "I do not." He looked at the stove blazing in the corner. He looked at the blankets piled on the children. None of it was enough. Their bodies could not hold onto heat from the air. They needed something more direct, more constant, more immediate. Daniel knew what that something was, and he knew what it would mean. He said carefully, "I can share my body heat with you. Humans run hot compared to most species. If I hold you and your brother against my skin, I can transfer warmth directly into your bodies. It might be enough to keep you alive until help comes." His eyes went wide with horror. The translation device flickered as she spoke rapidly, her words tumbling over each other. "No, no, you cannot. It is forbidden. Physical contact with other species is not allowed. It is shameful. It is wrong. Our people would never forgive us. We would be outcasts marked forever." Daniel closed his eyes. He had feared something like this. Every species had its taboos, its rules about the body and touch and intimacy. For, apparently, contact with none was one of the worst violations imaginable. He said gently, "If I do not do this, you and your brother will die. The storm will last 3 days. No rescue can reach us. I have no medical equipment, no heating machines, nothing but my own body and my own warmth. I can save you, but only if you let me." You do not understand, wept. Even if we survive, we will be ruined. No one will accept us. We will carry this shame forever. Daniel reached out and took her small, freezing hand in his. She flinched but did not pull away. I lost my wife and daughter, he said quietly. A shuttle accident. The hull broke open and they were gone before anyone could help them. I have spent 3 years hiding from that pain, running from it, trying to forget. But I cannot watch 2 children die when I have the power to save them. I cannot do that and still call myself human. He squeezed her hand gently. Your culture has its rules, I respect that, but my culture has rules too. And the first rule is that we do not let children die if we can help it. Not ever, not for any reason. Stared at him, her violet eyes searching his face for something she could trust. Daniel did not look away. He let her see everything. His grief, his determination, his hope that maybe, just maybe, he could do some good in a world that had given him so much pain. My brother whispered, save my brother first, he is weaker than me. He has always been weaker, please. Daniel nodded. He removed his outer shirt and lay down on the bed beside. The boy's body was so cold that touching him was like touching stone. Daniel pulled the child against his chest, wrapping his arms around the small form and covering them both with blankets. He felt the terrible cold seeping into his own body, and he forced himself to stay still, to keep sharing his warmth. Watched with wide eyes as Daniel curled protectively around her brother. Then slowly, she moved closer. Her body trembled with fear and cold and shame, but she pressed herself against Daniel's back, seeking the warmth that might save her life. It is forbidden, she whispered again, but this time the words sounded less like a rule and more like a prayer for forgiveness. Sometimes, Daniel said, the right thing to do breaks all the rules. Stirred in Daniel's arms. His eyes opened, unfocused and confused, and when he saw the human holding him, he screamed. The sound was high and thin and filled with terror, and he tried to pull away with what little strength he had. Spoke to him quickly in their own language, words the translation device did not capture. She held her brother's hand and talked until his struggling stopped and his breathing calmed. He still trembled, but his eyes found Daniel's face and stayed there, watching, waiting. He is afraid, said, but he will not fight anymore. I told him you are trying to help. I told him about the storm. I told him that mother and father would want us to live no matter what. Daniel held the frightened alien boy close and felt tears prick his own eyes. These children had lost everything, their home, their ship, maybe their parents. Now a stranger was holding them in a way their culture said was wrong, and they had no choice but to accept it or die. I am sorry, Daniel said, and he meant it for everything. For their suffering, for their fear, for the violation of their customs, for a universe that could be so cruel to the innocent. I am so sorry. The night stretched ahead of them, long and cold and uncertain. But Daniel held on, sharing his warmth with 2 dying children, refusing to let go. The hours passed slowly, each one feeling like a lifetime. Daniel held the children against his body and listened to the storm rage outside his cabin. The wind shook the walls and screamed through every crack in the wood. Snow piled against the windows until they became white squares of nothing. The fire in the stove was the only source of light, painting the room in shades of orange and shadow. Daniel did not sleep. He could not afford to. If his body temperature dropped while he was unconscious, the children would lose their only source of warmth. So he stayed awake, fighting exhaustion, monitoring the rise and fall of their small chests, adjusting his position whenever his arms went numb. And drifted in and out of consciousness. Their skin slowly changed from white back to gray, and then hints of silver blue began to return. It was working. The heat from Daniel's body was seeping into theirs, keeping their blood flowing, keeping their hearts beating. But it was a fragile thing, this borrowed warmth, and Daniel knew that any mistake could cost them their lives. Sometime after midnight, woke and stayed awake. She lay with her back pressed against Daniel's, her body warming slowly, her violet eyes staring at the ceiling. Why do you live alone? She asked through the translation device. Her voice was still weak but stronger than before. Because I lost everyone I loved, Daniel said. It hurt too much to be around other people. I came here to be alone with my pain. Did it help being alone? Daniel thought about that for a long moment. No, he admitted. It did not help. The pain stayed. I just stopped having anyone to share it with. Was quiet. Then she said, we believe that pain shared is pain divided. When someone suffers, their family gathers around them and holds them close. They share body heat, and in doing so, they share the burden of grief. It is how we heal. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. That sounds beautiful. It is, or it was before the war. His voice trembled. Our colony was attacked by a species that believes other races should serve them. They burned our cities. They killed so many people. The transport ship was carrying refugees to a safe world, but they found us. They attacked the ship. My parents put us in the escape pod because there was only room for two. She fell silent, and Daniel did not press her. He knew the shape of that silence. He had lived inside it for 3 years. I keep seeing my mother's face, said finally. When the pod door closed, she was smiling. She told me to be brave and to take care of. She said she loved us more than all the suns in the sky. And then the pod launched, and the ship was on fire behind us, and I do not know if she is alive or dead. I know how that feels, Daniel said. The not knowing, the wondering, it is the worst part sometimes. Tell me about your wife, said, and your daughter, if it does not hurt too much. Daniel smiled in the darkness, a sad smile that no one could see. Laura was a teacher. She taught young children, ages 5 and 6, how to read and write. She believed that every child deserved a chance to learn, no matter where they came from or how much money their family had. She was kind and patient, and she never gave up on anyone. He paused, the memories rushing back like water through a broken dam. Sophie was 7 years old. She loved animals, especially horses. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She used to make up stories about a horse that could fly and visit other planets. I would tell her that horses could not survive in space, and she would say that her horse was special. Listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, she said, "They sound wonderful." They were everything to me. And now you are everything to us, said softly. And me, you are our only hope, just like your family was yours. Before Daniel could respond, suddenly convulsed in his arms. The boy's body went rigid, his back arching, his mouth opening in a silent scream. His eyes rolled back, showing only white, and his small hands clawed at the blankets. Screamed, turning and reaching for her brother. What is happening? What is wrong with him? Daniel's paramedic training kicked in instantly. He turned onto his side, cleared his airway, checked his pulse. It was there, but erratic, fluttering like a trapped bird. He is going into shock, Daniel said. His body is fighting the cold, but he is losing. I need to bring him back. I need to give him a reason to fight. He pulled the boy close against his chest and began talking directly into his ear. Listen to me. You need to stay with us. Your sister is here. She needs you. You cannot leave her alone. Do you understand? You cannot give up. Did not respond. His body continued to shake, his breathing shallow and fast. Tell me about Earth, said suddenly, desperately. Tell him about your world. Give him something to hear, something to hold on to. Daniel understood. He began to speak, his voice calm and steady despite the fear pounding in his chest. Earth is a beautiful world. We have mountains covered in snow like the one outside this cabin. In winter, human children play in the snow. They make balls of it and throw them at each other. They build figures from it, shaped like people, and they give them faces with stones and sticks. When I was young, I used to build snow figures with my father. We would spend hours outside, making them as tall as we could. The convulsion slowed slightly. Daniel kept talking. We have oceans, vast bodies of water that stretch from one side of the world to the other. And in those oceans, there are creatures called whales. They are enormous, bigger than any land animal, and they sing to each other across thousands of miles. Some humans believe that whales are the creatures on Earth because they have been singing the same songs for millions of years. His breathing steadied. His eyes fluttered, still unfocused but no longer rolled back. What do you want to be when you grow up? Daniel asked. What do you dream about? What makes you happy? For a long moment there was no answer. Then, through the translation device, a tiny voice spoke. Ships, I want to fly ships like my father. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face, but he smiled and held the boy. Then you will fly ships. You will fly the fastest ships in the galaxy. But first you have to survive this night. You have to keep fighting. Can you do that for me? Can you be brave like your mother asked? I can try, whispered. Reached over Daniel's shoulder and took her brother's hand. She spoke to him in their own language, and though Daniel did not understand the words, he understood the love behind them. Brother and sister, holding onto each other through the longest night of their lives, refusing to let go. By the time the first gray light of dawn crept through the snow-covered windows, both children were still breathing. They were still alive. Daniel had kept them warm through the night, and they had kept each other strong. 3 days passed, 3 days of holding, warming, talking, and hopping. Daniel barely ate. He slept in short bursts, never more than an hour at a time, always waking to check on the children. His body ached from staying in the same position, and his mind grew foggy from exhaustion. But he did not stop. He could not stop. On the third morning, the storm finally broke. Daniel woke to silence, the absence of wind so strange after days of screaming noise that he thought something was wrong. Then he looked at the window and saw blue sky beyond the ice-crusted glass. He gently untangled himself from men who both protested weakly in their sleep. Their skin had returned to its proper silver-blue color, and their breathing was steady and strong. They would live. Somehow, against all odds, they would live. Daniel put on his coat and boots and stepped outside. The world was white and silent and beautiful, the mountains glittering under a cold sun. Snow had drifted against his cabin in waves taller than his head, but the sky was clear and the air was still. He waded through the snow to the shed where he kept his equipment and found the emergency beacon he had salvaged from the crashed escape pod. He had managed to repair it during brief moments when the children slept soundly. Now he powered it on and pointed it at the sky, hoping that someone out there was listening. 2 hours later, a ship descended through the clouds. It was larger than the escape pod, sleek and silver, with markings Daniel recognized as belonging to the Galactic Concord. The ship landed in the clearing near his cabin, blowing snow in all directions, and a ramp extended from its side. A rescue team emerged. There were 4 humans in cold-weather gear and 2 wrapped in heated suits that glowed with inner warmth. They were adults, tall and elegant, their silver-blue skin flawless and their violet eyes sharp with authority. One of the humans, a woman with short gray hair and a commanding presence, approached Daniel first. "I am Captain Grace of the Concord Rescue Division. We received your beacon signal. Are you the one who found the survivors?" "Yes," Daniel said. 2 children, they are inside, they are alive." Grace's eyes widened. "Alive? We did not expect any survivors from that crash. The temperatures here would have been lethal to within hours." "I kept them warm," Daniel said simply. "I did what I had to do." The rescue team entered the cabin and found an awake, sitting up in bed, wrapped in blankets. The children looked weak but alert, their eyes tracking the newcomers with a mixture of hope and fear. The 2 adults rushed to the children's side, speaking rapidly in their own language. Daniel watched as their expressions shifted from relief to confusion to something darker: horror, disgust. One of them, a male with sharp features and cold eyes, turned to Daniel. He spoke through a translation device that projected his words into the air. "You touched these children. You held them against your body. You violated the sacred boundaries of our people." Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "They were dying. I saved them." "You assaulted them," the spat. "Physical contact with a non is forbidden. It is shameful beyond words. These children will carry the stain of your actions for the rest of their lives. They will be outcasts, untouchable, ruined." The female nodded, her face twisted with revulsion. "We will be taking them to face examination. The contamination must be assessed. Cleansing rituals must be performed. What you have done cannot be undone, but the damage must be contained." Daniel felt anger rising in his chest, hot and fierce. "I saved their lives. I held them for 3 days while a blizzard tried to kill us all. I did not sleep. I barely ate. I shared my body heat with 2 dying children because it was the only way to keep them alive. And you call that contamination?" "You do not understand our ways," the male said. "You are human. You cannot comprehend what you have done." "Then explain it to me," Daniel growled. "Explain how letting children die is better than touching them. Explain how your precious rules are worth more than their lives. Because from where I stand, your ways do not make any sense at all." Before they could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. "He saved us." Everyone turned. Had risen from the bed and was standing on shaky legs, her violet eyes blazing with a fire that seemed impossible for someone so small and weak. "He saved us," she repeated, her words projected clearly by the translation device. "We were dying. Our bodies were cold and our hearts were stopping, and there was no one else. He found us in the snow. He carried us through the storm. He held us for 3 nights and would not let us go." The male started to speak, but cut him off. "He did not hurt us. He did not violate us. He gave us his warmth when we had none. He talked to us through the darkness. He held my brother when almost died and brought him back with words and hope. He cried for us. He cared for us. He was more gentle and kind than anyone I have ever known. Had risen too, leaning on the bed for support. He walked slowly to Daniel and took his hand. The boy looked up at the man who had saved him and spoke two words that made the adults freeze in shock. "Father Warm." The female gasped. The male's face went pale. "Father Warm," said again. "He gave us Father Warm like our father did when we were bobbies, like our mother did when we were scared. He is our father now, our second father." Daniel did not know what the term meant, but he could see its effect. The accusation of assault crumbled. The horror on the faces transformed into something else, something that might have been shame. Grace stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes gleaming with something like pride. "I think we need to hear the full story before any judgments are made. From the beginning, from everyone involved." The cabin fell silent as began to speak, telling the story of the crash, the cold, the human who refused to let them die. And by the time she finished, even the officials had tears in their eyes. Daniel Porter had not violated anything. He had performed the most sacred act of culture, an act of parent protecting child, of warmth freely given, of love without condition. He had done it without knowing, without understanding, simply because it was the right thing to do. And the galaxy would never forget. 6 months had passed since the blizzard, and the world had not forgotten Daniel Porter. The story of the human who saved 2 children had spread across the galactic concord like wildfire. News networks on 100 worlds had broadcast it. Scholars and philosophers had debated its meaning. And slowly, carefully, the perception of humanity had begun to change. At first, many species had reacted with confusion or disgust. The idea of sharing body heat with children of another species seemed strange at best, disturbing at worst. Across the galaxy had expressed outrage that their cultural boundaries had been crossed, even in service of saving lives. How could humans be so casual about physical contact? How could they fail to understand that some rules should never be broken? But as the full story emerged, the outrage faded. Daniel had not acted out of ignorance or cruelty. He had known that his actions might cause harm. He had understood that the children might be traumatized or shamed. And he had done it anyway because the alternative was watching them die. He had chosen their lives over his own comfort, over their cultural rules, over everything except the simple truth that children should not die alone in the cold. Galactic scholars began to study human history more closely. They discovered that this behavior was not unusual. Throughout the ages, humans had risked their lives to save strangers. They had jumped into frozen rivers to rescue drowning people they had never met. They had run into burning buildings to carry out children who were not their own. They had donated organs, blood, and bone marrow to keep strangers alive. They called it compassion. They called it empathy. They called it love. For many alien species, these concepts were difficult to understand. Evolution had shaped them to prioritize survival, to calculate risks and benefits, to help others only when it served their own interests. But humans seem to have evolved something different, an irrational, inexplicable drive to protect the weak and vulnerable regardless of personal cost. Scientists called it altruism. Philosophers called it the human heart. Daniel did not pay much attention to any of this. He had returned to his cabin in the mountains and resumed his quiet life, trapping animals and guiding hunters and speaking to no one for weeks at a time. The fame and attention made him uncomfortable. He had not saved and to become a symbol. He had saved them because they needed saving, and he was there, and he could not walk away. But the galaxy would not let him forget. On a clear spring morning, 6 months after the blizzard, Daniel sat on his porch and watched the snow melt from the mountains. The air was warm and sweet, and birds sang in the trees above his cabin. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace. Then he heard the sound of engines descending from the sky. A shuttle appeared over the ridge, sleek and silver, bearing markings he did not recognize. It landed in the clearing where the rescue ship had landed months before, and the engines powered down. Daniel rose from his chair and walked toward it, his heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. The shuttle door opened, and 2 small figures came running out and raced across the clearing, their silver-blue skin glowing in the sunlight, their violet eyes bright with joy. They crashed into Daniel with such force that he nearly fell over, their arms wrapping around him in an embrace that held nothing back. Daniel shouted, "We came back, we promised we would come back." "You are so warm," laughed, pressing his face against Daniel's chest. "I missed your warmth." Daniel hugged them tight, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. He had not realized until this moment how empty his cabin had felt without them, how quiet the nights had been, how cold his bed had seemed, even with extra blankets. He had not realized how much he had missed being needed. A third figure emerged from the shuttle, moving more slowly. She was a woman, tall and beautiful, with silver-blue skin and violet eyes that held the weight of unimaginable sorrow. She walked toward Daniel with careful steps, her gaze never leaving his face. "My name is," she said through a translation device, "I am Ant's mother." Daniel's breath caught. "You survived the ship, the fire." "I survived," confirmed. "Many others did not. My husband did not." Her voice trembled, but she kept speaking. "I searched for my children for weeks. When I finally received word that they were alive, that a human had saved them, I did not believe it. I thought it must be a mistake. But then I heard the full story and I understood." She stepped closer, until she was standing directly in front of Daniel, looking up into his eyes. "You gave my children your warmth when they had none. You held them through the longest night of their lives. You refused to let them die, even though you did not know them, even though helping them might hurt them, even though you had already lost everything yourself." Her hand reached out and touched his cheek, a gesture that Daniel now understood carried immense meaning in culture. "Among my people there is no greater gift than father warmth. It is the bond between parent and child, the promise that no matter what happens, you will be protected. My husband gave that gift too and when they were born, and now you have given it to them again when they had no father left to turn to." His eyes filled with tears. "You are their second father now, Daniel Porter. In our tradition, in our law, in our hearts, we will never forget what you did for us. We will never stop being grateful." Daniel could not speak. He could only stand there, surrounded by two children who clung to him like he was the center of their universe, while their mother looked at him with something that might have been love. "I came to ask you something," said. "The children want to show you their new home. They want you to meet their people, to see their world, to be part of their lives. Will you come with us? Just for a visit, just to see." Daniel looked down at him. Their faces were turned up toward his, full of hope and expectation. He thought of his empty cabin, his silent nights, his years of running from grief. He thought of Laura and Sophie and what they would want him to do. "Not yet," he said softly, "but soon, I promise." And did not seem disappointed. They seemed to understand that some wounds took time to heal. Instead, they pulled him toward the cabin, chattering about everything they wanted to show him, everything they wanted to tell him, everything they had missed about the strange, warm human who had saved their lives. That afternoon, Daniel taught them how to build a figure from the remaining snow. They laughed as they struggled with the cold substance, their warm fingers melting it faster than they could shape it. Watched from the porch, a smile on her face, the first smile she had worn since before the war. And somewhere across the galaxy, scholars and politicians and ordinary beings looked at the story of Daniel Porter and the children he had saved, and they began to understand something important about humanity. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the or the fastest or the most advanced, but they had something that many species lacked, something that could not be measured or calculated or understood through logic alone. They had hearts that would not let children die in the cold. They had arms that would hold strangers through the night. They had warmth they would share with anyone who needed it, without asking for anything in return. And that, the galaxy was beginning to realize, made them dangerous in the best possible way.